So for this next example that says find the slope of a line passing through the points 2, -1 and -5, 3, I want to make sure that I copy down the formula correctly. So here that slope formula is m is equal to, and I have y2 minus my y1 and x2 minus my x1. So now that I have that written down, it might be helpful to go ahead and label our points. So we have our x1, y1, and we have our x2, y2. So now when I plug in my values into my formulas, and I have subtraction in between, this is what it's going to look like. So my y2 value is 3, and my y1 value is -1. My x2 value is -5, and my x1 value is a +2. So I'm going to get 3 minus -1. That's the same as adding, so I have 4 up on top. And down the bottom, -5 minus 2 is the same as adding a negative number, so that's a -7. So I can say with confidence that my slope is going to be a -4/7. And you might be thinking, wait, how did she do that if the slope that she calculated was 4/7? So you might have realized where the negative sign is. It does not matter where the negative sign is. These all mean the exact same thing. I can even have said -4/7. So -4/7 is the same as 4/7, which is the same as negative a fraction 4/7. Those all mean the exact same thing. It just means that your fraction is indeed negative. Okay, so for the next example, it says identify the slope and the y-intercept of this equation. So hopefully you remember that y is equal to mx plus b. So we just figured out that the m would be the slope. So that would be the thing in front of the x, okay? And the other thing that we know is our b value. That b value is our y-intercept, okay? So when I go ahead and answer this, I'm going to say m, which is my slope, is equal to my -3/4. And I also have that my b is going to be the ordered pair 0, -4. Okay. So now in general, if I were to have the slope of a horizontal line, so if I were to think about the x and y coordinate, then a horizontal line goes from left to right. So here, my slope would be 0. Okay. Now, if I want to talk about a vertical line and I have my x and y slope, then it would go up and down. So my slope here would be undefined. So that would be an undefined slope. Okay, so it tells us sketch the graph of the line passing through the given point and having the given slope. So we want to go through this point and this slope. So the point that's given, it has my x and my y value. So the x value is +3 and my y value is -5. And the slope is 0. Since the slope is 0, then I know that it's a horizontal line, which means it goes left to right. So at this point, I'm trying to make it as straight as possible. I was trying to make a nice line, but it didn't quite work out. So I'm gonna try that again. So 3, -5, I'm still here, and my horizontal line, there we go, just better if I just draw it, is right there. So that is what my slope is going to look like, or better yet, my line is going to look like. So for the next one, I have my x and my y. So when I graph that point, the x value is -2 and my y value is a +6. And it says that my slope is undefined. Since the slope is undefined, I know that it's going to be vertical. And because it's vertical, that means my slope is undefined, so it goes straight up and down. So there is my line that goes through -2, 6, and it's undefined. Okay, so another form of a linear equation is the point-slope formula written as y minus y1 equal to m parentheses x minus x1. So we're going to use this equation as a method to figure out our answer in slope-intercept form. So it says write the equation of a line with slope m is equal to -3 and passing through this point. So these are the two pieces of information that I need, your slope and the point. So that point, don't forget, that's an x value and a y value. So I'm going to go ahead and use that general equation. So when I write this general equation, I'm going to write in red everything that I'm going to be plugging in. So that I have y minus, I'm going to plug in my y1 value, is equal to my m, since I'm going to be plugging in my n value, x minus, and then you're going to plug in your x1 value. So everything in red are going to be values that I plug in. So I'm going to rewrite this as y minus, and my y1 value, I can think of this y1 as equal to 8. And it's equal to my slope, and I already have my slope value here as -3. So that's a -3. And my x1 value here is 4. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in as a 4. So now, when I simplify this, I'm going to have y minus 8, and I'm going to distribute -3x plus 12. From here, I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So I can get that y is equal to a -3x, and I have a positive 20. So my final answer, y is equal to a -3x plus 20. This gives me my final answer in slope-intercept form, okay? And this is from using the point-slope formula. That is the method that I had used. Now, I can also do this using a different method. So here, let's say method. And my method is going to be to directly plug into my y equals mx plus b. Okay, well, if that's the case, then I know that I have y is equal to mx plus b. So for here, what I know? Well, I know that if I have the ordered pair 0, -3, that's my y-intercept. The reason why is because x is equal to 0. So then that b value is equal to a -3, okay? And I also have my x and my y value as well. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. So my y value is a positive 4. And the slope value, well, I don't have that yet, so I'm going to write that as m. But my x value is a positive 3. And I have my b value as a -3. So if I'm going to work this out, I really have 4 is equal to 3x minus 3. Or sorry, not m, not x, but m. So it's an m times 3. There we go. So what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and add 3 to both sides. That would give me 7 is equal to m times 3. Well, what I can do from here, since it's multiplication, divide by 3. So now I'm going to get that 7/3 is equal to my m. So now I have all of my information. I have that my b value was equal to -3, and I also have that my m value is equal to 7/3. So now when I rewrite it, I'm going to say that y is equal to my m, which is 7/3 x, and my b value, which is a -3. So that'll give me my final answer in slope-intercept form. Okay. A third way to write a linear equation can be written in standard form as ax plus by is equal to c. So we want to find the equation of a line with m is equal to -6 passing through the point 1/4 -2. We want to write the equation in standard form. So maybe you want to use the point slope form. So I'm going to go ahead and write that equation down. So I have my y minus my y1 is equal to my m, and x minus my x1. And I just have it as a habit to write in the values I'm going to plug in red, so I know that's what I'm plugging in. And everything in black stays as is. So I have y minus, and my y1 value, well, here's my x1, here's my y1. So my y1 value is a -2. And I have my slope value as a -6. And my x1 value is a 1/4. So when I simplify this a bit, I'm going to have y plus 2, since subtracting negative turns into addition. And I have x minus my 1/4. So to distribute that -6 would be -6x, and a negative times a negative would be a positive. So here, if I were to multiply 6 times 1/4, well, you can think about it as numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. So I'm going to have 6 on top, and I'm going to have a 4 on the bottom. And I can simplify this later. So now what I want to do is I want to subtract 2 from both sides. So now that I have y is equal to -6x, and I have a positive 6/4 minus 2. So what I really want to do is I want to concentrate on simplifying 6/4 minus 2. And if I need to, I can do that on my calculator. If you aren't really comfortable with fractions, you can always use your calculator. So I'm going to go to alpha y equals, oops, let's try that again. So alpha y equals my fraction, and I have 6/4, and I'm subtracting 2. This will give me my answer as a fraction. So my answer here would be a -1/2. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I rewrite that as a -1/2. Okay, so remember what this is asking me to do. It wants to make sure that you write it in standard form, which is the ax plus by is equal to c. And don't forget that they have to be integers. So I'm like, okay, so the x has to be written first. So I'm going to go ahead and add 6x to both sides. So when I do that, I will get a 6x plus y is equal to a -1/2. Well, don't forget it also says that your answers must be integers. So that fraction doesn't help us. So since it's a fraction of -1/2, that means I'm going to multiply every single thing by a 2. Once I do that, the denominator or the fraction will cancel out. So I really have a 2 times 6, which is 12x, 2 times 1, which is a 2y, and a positive 2 times a -1/2 ends up becoming a -1. And that would be my answer in standard form. Now I want to think about my parallel and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines have the same slope and different y-intercepts. As for perpendicular lines, we have perpendicular lines have slopes that are opposite and the reciprocal of the other, okay? So if I'm thinking about my definition, opposite, that means it's either negative, and the opposite would be positive. The reciprocal, that means you kind of flip the fraction. So if I were to have 2/3, my reciprocal would be 3/2. So you can think of it as the flip of the fraction. In case you guys needed that little reminder, okay? So we can see from the graphs that we have our parallel lines and we have a perpendicular line. So visually, this is parallel. And we can think of parallel lines as a symbol that looks like this. And on the right-hand side, these lines are perpendicular. And we can write the universal sign, the symbol, as an upside down T with that little square. That square tells us that it meets at a 90-degree angle. That's what that square represents, okay? So it says down below, graph the equations of the lines and state whether they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So we want to know what happens when we graph these. So let's go ahead and do so. So let's think about my first equation. I'm going to label it as 1. I have my 3y is equal to a negative 4x plus 3. Well, to simplify this, I'm going to divide everything by 3. That will give me that y is equal to a negative 4/3 x plus 1. So this tells me that I'm going to start my y-intercept at 0, 1. That is going to be the first point that I graph. Always start at the y-intercept. The slope is a negative 4/3. That means I'm going to go down 4 and to the right 3. And it also means I could have gone up 4, but then I would have gone left 3. And so when I connect my lines, that is what it looks like, okay? So now I have graphed my first equation. Now I'm going to look at my second equation. That's my 3x minus my 4y is equal to a positive 8. So in order to graph this, I really want to get the y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. That will give me a negative 4y is equal to a negative 3x plus 8. From there, I'm going to divide everything by a negative 4. So I'm going to get that y is equal to a negative divided by negative is a positive. So now I have a 3/4 x. A positive 8 divided by a negative 4 would give me a negative 2. So this tells me that my y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 2. It tells me that my slope is 3/4. So I'm going to go up 3 and to the right 4, or down 3 to the left 4. So that means I'm going to go ahead and graph the following now. So I have my first dot, or my first point at 0, negative 2. And I'm going to go up 3 and over 4. I also could have gone down 3 and over 4. And that is my graph, okay? So now that I have this, I can tell you that these lines are going to be perpendicular. So we can tell from the first equation that since the slope was equal to a negative 4/3, and when looking at that second equation as a positive 3/4, we can see that the signs are opposite and they are also reciprocal, so therefore we can conclude that the lines were perpendicular. So we can say that these two lines are perpendicular, and you can also see that they meet at a 90-degree angle. Moving on to the next example. It says, write the equation of a line parallel to 5x plus 3y plus 1 and passing through the point. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our old equation. The only thing that I want from my old equation is to identify the slope. So if I have 5x plus 3y is equal to 1, I'm going to figure out my slope. So I am going to subtract 5x from both sides. So I can have a 3y is equal to a negative 5x plus 1. I'm also going to divide everything by 3. So I can get that y is equal to a negative 5/3 x plus a 1/3. So from here, I can say that my old slope is a negative 5/3. Now, what I want to do is I want to think about what my goal is. My goal is to come up with a new equation. That new equation is going to have two components. It's going to have a slope that's parallel to this line. So since I have the word parallel, that means it's going to be the same slope. So my m is going to be negative 5/3, since that would be parallel to the old line. And now, using this point for x and y, I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. So my equation is y is equal to mx plus b. I have my y value as a 5 that I'm plugging in. I have my slope as a negative 5/3. I have my x value as a positive 3, and I have a plus b. So here I'm going to have 5 is equal to, and when I multiply this fraction by the 3, I see that the denominator and the numerator cancels, so I'm left with a negative 5 plus b. So I'm going to go ahead and add 5 to both sides. So then that way I can get that 10 is equal to b. So now I have that my b value is equal to 10. So I can rewrite my final equation, and I'm going to rewrite it as y is equal to my negative 5/3 x plus 10. So that is going to be the equation of my new equation. Okay, so for the next example, now I want to do the exact same thing, except now it's going to be perpendicular. So, okay, let's try to use the same language here. So I want my old equation, so I can figure out what my slope is going to be. So I have a 5x minus a 3y plus 4 is equal to a 0. So So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 4 on both sides. So I can get a 5x minus 3y is equal to a negative 4. Now I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. So I can get a negative 3y is equal to a negative 5x minus 4. And I still need to isolate the y, so I'm going to divide everything by that negative 3. So I can get that y is equal to a positive 5/3 x plus 4/3. So my old slope that I have is right here is a 5/3. Now I want to think about my new equation. My new equation is going to have a slope that's perpendicular to this. So if it's going to be perpendicular, then my slope is going to be the opposite and the reciprocal. So those are the two things that need to happen. So it needs to be the opposite sign. So since it's positive, it's now going to be negative. And it needs to be the reciprocal, which means the flip. So now it's going to be a 3 over my 5. And I have my ordered pair. So I have my x and my y value that I'm plugging in. So I have my y is equal to mx plus b. So I'm going to plug in my y value. My y value is 1. I'm going to plug in my m value, which is a negative 3/5. I'm going to plug in my x value, which is a negative 4. And I have my plus b. So now when I calculate this, I will have 1 is equal to a positive 12/5 plus b. So now I'm going to subtract that 12/5 from both sides. So I really have 1 minus 12/5 is equal to b. And again, you can use your calculator here, or you can do this value over to the side, but 1 minus 12/5 would give me a negative 7/5, which is equal to my b value. So my final answer here that I'm going to have is going to be y is equal to my negative 3/5 x minus my 7/5. So that will be my final answer. Okay. And that is the end of section 2.2. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thank you.